Hello, and welcome to the Dtmax Productivity Features session of Synergy 2021. My name is Gerry Vittoratos. I've now been a trainer here and a head trainer at Thomson Reuters DT Tax and Accounting for 15 years, and it'll be my pleasure to show you these features today. So, what exactly are we going to see in this session? So what we're going to see is some of the more little known productivity features of the program. Some of the newer ones that have been added over the years that you might not be aware of, and some of the classics that we all know. And we're going to go through them a little bit more in depth. So we're going to do this by breaking up the session through the screens of Dtmax and then going to the preferences menu and showing you a couple of additional features that I find are great and that are unfortunately very little used. And hopefully you'll be able to use them after this session. So we're going to start with the client list and we're going to look at sortable columns. So you could actually sort any column in the client list of Dtmax by simply clicking on the column header. But it's an option that you have to activate, which we're going to see in the session. More visible family groupings as well. This will actually be, for those of you who are experienced with Dtmax, this will actually be a blast from the past. We're actually going to go back to the older view where the delineations of the family groupings are going to be clearer. Filter out inactive clients as well. This is a great feature that was added a few years ago where you can now hide the inactive clients. We're going to see how to do it. We're going to go then to the data entry and show how we could actually assign different colors for different family members, for different types of family members. We're going to see how to do that. We're also going to show you how to tag keywords as well. You could actually tag them through question marks or little check marks, which also affect the diagnostics as well. We're going to look at the right-hand side display, look at that, the classic feature, the classic productivity feature unique to Dtmax, which is the right-hand side display. And we will show you how to bulk import data from right to left. From there, we're going to look at the tax planning module or the plans, and we're going to look at a new feature that we've added within the plans that I think a lot of you will appreciate. Next, we're going to look as well at the tax return. We're going to look at how we could tag fields. It's actually there's quite a few options that you could do when it comes to tagging fields within the tax return itself and adding notes as well directly onto the fields. We're going to look at a quick track as well, where we could source source amounts that have been calculated on the return. And we're going to look at sourcing from the diagnostics pages. This is, again, a newer feature of the program where we could actually source directly from the diagnostics pages, like the optimization report, like the error prevention report. We're going to see that as well. Then finally, we're going to go through the preferences menu, and we're going to look at two options that unfortunately are little used. And we're going to go through them and show them to you. And that's the authorization form, client signature posting status. So essentially, you could actually block the transmission of a return unless you, the supervisor, indicates to the software that that the client has signed their authorization form. And then finally, we're going to look at the engagement letter and the pro forma questionnaire. These two are really productivity kings here that will allow you to more efficiently and quickly produce your customers' tax returns and also protect your bottom line at the same time. So we hope you enjoy. Here is the presentation. So as mentioned in the introduction, we're going to go through each one of the screens of Dtmax, the 3 screens in other words, and we're going to look at some of these productivity features that you might be aware of or that you might not be aware of because they are relatively new within the program. So let's start with a client list. So as we know, Dtmax client list is where all your customers' files reside. You get basic information on each file that you're producing using Dtmax. For example, I can see the date of birth, I could see the age, I could see the SIN number of the client, their phone number, and the processing status. So in other words, what's the progress of the file? Where am I at within this file? You get a bird's eye view of all this information without requiring you to go into each individual client file to gain access to that information. Now, by default, the program allows you to sort certain columns within the client list. So for example, I can sort by name, I can sort by birth date, or I can sort by SIN, or SIN number in this case. Now, the program shows you which columns you can sort by default by a little line at the edge of each one of these columns. Now, a few years ago, we actually added a feature where you can sort any single column that's within your client list. In order to activate that feature, simply go to the Preferences menu, choose User Interface, and once you're in there, in the first section of the user interface screen, under the Client List section, tick the box next to Make All Columns Sortable. So the program is confirming that it will make all the columns sortable through this new window. Simply click OK. Click Save at the bottom left of your screen. And now any single column that you add within your Dtmax client list becomes sortable. So for example, a really handy one would be the processing status. So I can sort my client list and group up my clients by processing status instead of just the standard family groupings. So when I click now on the processing status column header, you'll notice now that the program has grouped up your clients by processing status. So you see all the clients here that are ready to print. You see the client that is ready for e-file. So you don't have to resort to the filters every single time to see clients sorted or grouped up into these processing statuses and get to those clients right away in order to either e-file or to correct any errors in their file. Now, in order to go back to the default client list, which is what we would call the family client list, all you have to do is simply click on the family icon on the top taskbar. Simply click on that icon, and you will notice now the program goes back to the default mode or the default view of the client list, which is under the family groupings. Now, speaking of family groupings, you'll notice that the family groups are delimited by a jagged line between each one of these groupings. So you see that Julia and Nicholas are together, Robert is on his own, and Paul is with Catherine, Stephanie, and Diane. Unfortunately, these demarcation lines or delimitations are not necessarily clear on the screen. Even on mine right now, you don't see them that clearly. The good news is that we added a feature within the program to make the family groupings more visible. In order to activate that feature, simply click on the Preferences menu again and go back to the User Interface option. Once you're in there, simply tick the box next to Make Families More Visible. And once you have done that, click on Save at the bottom left of the screen. And now what you'll notice is that the demarcation lines are a lot clearer. Instead of them being just jagged lines, they're clear, delimited lines. And your family head is now a different color from the rest of the family members. So now you know precisely who the family head is within these family groupings. Another feature that was added recently to Dtmax is the filtering of the inactive clients. In other words, you can now hide inactive clients who are essentially no longer your clients within Dtmax. Okay, so what I've done here is that I've added an inactive client within my client list. So this is a client that's no longer a client for whatever reason that could be. I mean, some of the reasons can be the client is deceased, obviously is not coming back, or a client that's no longer a client that simply has not returned for at least 2 tax seasons, essentially. So in that case, the program will show them by default, but you can activate one of the more recent features of the client list, which is the filter of inactive clients, to hide those specific clients. So you do that through the active clients filter. Okay, so when you click on the active clients filter, the program you will notice now has hidden my inactive client. And what's great about this active client filter is the fact that when you run filters within the software for whatever reason, whether it is through a processing status or whether you're looking for a specific amount on the tax return of the client, Dtmax will no longer have those clients within your filter results. So these clients are essentially hidden and out of sight for you while you're working with Dtmax. Now, if for whatever reason your client comes back, let's say it's a client that did not return for 2 tax seasons and simply they're late filing and they're coming back to you to file their tax return, then all you have to do is simply click again on the active filter icon and the inactive client will reappear. Now we will go to the data entry. And before going to data entry, let me show you a newish feature of the data entry where you can distinguish more easily between the different family members. So by going into the Preferences menu and going again to the User Interface option, you will notice an option where you can differentiate the family members with different colors. So from now on, the program will display different colors for each type of family member that you're in. So tick the box next to that option, click Save at the bottom left of your screen. And then once I go into a family file, for example, let's say Paul over here, you'll notice that Paul, who's my family head, has a blue screen right now. But when I switch to Paul's spouse, Diane, you'll notice that Diane has a different color. So that's the program clearly distinguishing between the spouses. Okay, that way there is no erroneous data entry done in the wrong family member. You'll know right away that you are in a different family member from the family head. From there, when I go to the dependents file, you'll notice the exact same thing, a different color now chosen for dependents, in this case, green. Now let's have a look at another feature of Dtmax data entry, which are the review tags. So when you are entering fields within the data entry, you could actually put check marks next to certain fields or question marks next to other fields. For example, when I'm double checking the entries that I've done here on my T4, if the entry is correct, I can simply right click on the field and tag the keyword checked OK. That way I know that I have verified this specific field. I could also attach a note to those fields as well. And that's any single field that I input an amount within Dtmax's data entry. So I right click again on the field and I could say attach note to the keyword and simply enter my review note. Once I have done that, I simply click on Save, and the program will attach the note next to the field itself. So as mentioned before, I could put check marks or I could put question marks next to certain fields. Now the question marks are particularly handy because I can flag a specific field and add that flag to the diagnostics of the program itself. So for example, on $35,000 of income, $1,000 CPP seems off in my data entry. So I can simply right click on the field and choose to tag it for review, which is going to add a question mark with an exclamation mark next to the field itself. Not only do I see that tag of a question mark next to the field itself, what the program will also do is add it to the diagnostics of the data entry. In other words, the notes and error messages within your data entry. simply click on the icon, and the error and warning messages window will pop up, and you'll notice now that this tag that I've added to that specific field has been added to my diagnostics within the data entry. I can simply double click and Dtmax will take me directly to where I have tagged that field. The data entry tags also allow you to remove certain diagnostics from within the error and warning messages window. For example, the $1,000 of CPP contribution, or what I think is the erroneous amount in this case, has also been flagged by Dtmax, where the program indicates that the amount should have been $1,653 instead of $1,000. Now, through the review tags, more specifically the checkmark tag, I could actually eliminate these two particular messages, the CPP contribution and the EI premiums contribution message. Although the amounts might be wrong, if the slip indicates those specific amounts that I've entered, then I want to remove those specific warning messages. I can do this through the green checkmark review tag. So I close my diagnostics here. I right click on the amount or on the field, and I say that it is checked okay. I reviewed the slip. The slip says $1,000. There's nothing else I could do. I will tag it that everything is correct, and I will do the same thing for the EI premium contribution. Again, right click on the field, tag the keyword checked okay. Now the program has tagged them as checked. And when I go back to my error and warning messages, you will notice that these two error and warning messages are now gone. Okay, I've told the program that I reviewed the entry, everything is correct. Therefore, the program has removed those two error and warning messages. Now, these tags will only remove these two error and warning messages specifically. Okay, so we're talking EI, we're talking CPP, and if you're in Quebec, we're also talking about QPIP as well. Okay, once you check with a green check mark on those fields, the program will eliminate those error and warning messages for those specific examples. We are currently working on expanding this functionality across the board within Dtmax data entry. Now let's have a look at one of the biggest productivity features of Dtmax, and one of the features that is really unique to Dtmax and that makes Dtmax unique in turn, and that is the right-hand side display. So as we know, and I'm going to go into a file where I've got some data. As we know with the right-hand side display, you can choose to have a real-time comparative between data from, for example, the prior year and your data entry for the current year. Or, for example, you can use it to download through the autofill my return feature of the CRA to download the slips contained within the CRA's database. So in my example, what I could do is show here in Diane's file her data entry for the previous year. Okay, that's the option that I've chosen. And there's several options that you could choose within the right-hand side display. So at its base, the right-hand side display allows you a real-time comparative of raw data. So not just a tax return summary where you see the different results. You're getting the raw data of what you inputted from last year as a real-time comparative to this year. Okay, so at the very least, you could avoid costly omissions or mistakes within your files. What the right-hand side display also is a guide, okay, where the program essentially guides you in your data entry. So instead of looking up the keywords that you're looking for, Dtmax will produce them for you on the left with the data that you inputted on the right. And all you need to do is simply input the new amounts from one year to the next. So you're not hunting for keywords anymore. You're simply allowing Dtmax through the right-hand side display to guide you in your data entry. That's the second aspect of the right-hand side display. The third aspect, and the most powerful one, obviously, is the import feature, or what is commonly called within Dtmax copying from right to left. So regardless of the option that you choose in this right-hand side display, you can import the information from one year to the next. Now, importing is very simply done, where all you need to do is simply go to the main keyword of a keyword group. You press F5 as a shortcut key on your keyboard to highlight that specific keyword group, and then you can simply right-click and choose Copy to left-hand side. And the program will simply import the data that is displayed on the right-hand side into your current year data entry. And like I mentioned before, this can be used for any one of the options of the right-hand side display, be it the previous year, be it any other client that's in your database, be it the autofill my return feature of the CRA and of Revenue Quebec, where, as I mentioned before, you can download the slips that are within both governments' databases and import them directly. Now, for those of you who are experts in Dtmax, you know this already, you know this feature. What you might not know is a quicker way of importing within Dtmax. In other words, the bulk import of Dtmax. So in this case, I've got quite a bit of data that I want to import in bulk. I don't want to highlight each one of these groups individually and copy them from right to left, one by one. There is a feature in the program where you can bulk import all of these slips and all this information in this case in one shot. The way to do this is as follows. You go to the first keyword group and you highlight that keyword group, okay, which I have already done. As I mentioned before, I clicked on the main keyword of the group and I pressed F5 as a shortcut key on my keyboard. Now from there, go to the range of keywords or information that you want to import. So for example, in my case, I want to import everything up until historical information. So I take the last keyword within that range, which would be donations. So last main keyword of a keyword group within the range of the information that I want to import. I click on donations and I press F5 again. You will notice now that the program highlights all of the keyword groups that are found within the T4 and donations. Therefore, now I can bulk import that information from, for example, the CRA's database into Dtmax. So again, I take the first keyword group that I want to import, I press F4, and then I look at the range of the information that I want to import, and I grab the last main keyword of the keyword group that I want to import. In this case, it would be donations. So the last group that I want to import is donations. I click on donations, I press F5 again. Dtmax will highlight the entire range, every single keyword group that is found in between. Once I've done that, I right-click and I choose Copy to left-hand side. And as you can see, Dtmax has now performed the bulk import of the data. Now let's have a look at another productivity feature of the program, a particularly handy one. And this is our tax planning module, or what we call simply the plans within Dtmax. So what you can do within Dtmax is produce up to 6 different versions of the same return without altering your client's original file. And on top of it, the program will save those versions complete with all the forms and schedules for future reference. So you won't just end up with a summary that shows you the different versions. You will get all the relevant forms and schedules as well. So let's see a little bit of that feature, and let's have a look at some features that you might not be aware of within these plans. So when you click here on the production drop-down menu, you'll notice the 6 versions of the plans. Okay, in other words, the 6 versions of tax returns you can produce within this file. And what's great about it is that you never leave the customer's file. You're not creating dummy clients for these customers in order to try these scenarios or these, what if versions. You're staying within your customer's file. You're going to get a complete return with all the schedules and all the summaries, and you stay within the file and you never alter your client's original file. So to trigger the process, you simply click here on the drop-down menu called Production, and you choose the first plan that's available to you. Now, the first option is to keep blank. So this option is there in case you need to produce alternative returns. This can be the case for a bankruptcy return. This can be the case for a deceased return. For example, you have a final return to produce or a rights and things return to produce as well. So you can produce the final return in your production, and you can produce the rights and things in the plan. Okay, that would be the case where you would choose to keep blank. However, in the majority of the cases that you will use these plans, which is again a tax planning module, is to essentially reproduce the file as is. And then from there, you play around with the scenario. So you could choose to copy from the previous year if you want to. Okay, so the program will simply bring over the data from the previous year, allowing you to input, new information, make alterations as you wish. Or you can choose to copy over from the work you've already done in the current year. And that's the example that I'm going to try, which is going to be copy from production. So I've already worked on the file. And in this case, in this example, I'll try an example where the client's not sure whether they want to put into their RSP. What would be the effect of their return should they put $2,000 worth of an RSP contribution? So I will click on copy from production. I will click OK. And now I find myself in the plan A. Okay, as you see here on my screen. Now, step number 1, and this might be a basic step, but some might not be aware of this, is you can name this plan whatever it is you're trying. So what is it that you're trying to do here within this plan? Okay, it's the scenario that you're playing with? What's the version you're playing with? You can name that plan through a specific keyword. And the keyword in one word is simply plan title. So you add the keyword through the key with a plus sign, or F11 as a shortcut key on your keyboards, and you say plan title in one word. Once you're in there, simply call it what you're trying to do. Now, in previous courses that I've given for Dtmax, I always indicate that your plan A should be a reproduction of your production. So it should be the original file again. And that's for the purposes of the planning summary that the program produces when the plans that compare each plan one to the other. Well, the great news now is you don't have to do this anymore through a new feature that was added in Dtmax recently. So for example, in my plan title, I will try my alternative 2000 RSP, which would be my hypothetical contribution. The client's got about a $2,000 budget. The client's debating whether to put it in their TFSA or whether to put it in their RSP. Is it worthwhile to put in the RSP? What will be the effect on their return? So you simply call it 2000 RSP. In this case, 2000 RSP. And then from there, simply add the hypothetical RSP contribution. So I put in January, February. Let's say it's usually going to be the first 60 days of the year. I put in my amount, and then I simply calculate my alternative return. So the program now is computing the return within this file. Okay, so again, what's beautiful about these plans is you're getting a full return in schedules, as if you have a brand new client in front of you. Okay, so you're not just going to end up with a summary that compares each version. Okay, you're going to get a full return in schedules as if you are producing a brand new return, a brand new file. Now, what's new in Dtmax is that you can now compare a production to a plan directly. Whereas before, the indication I would always give in my courses was, produce a plan A, don't change anything, just, put in the same information as your production and then go into your plan B and try your alternative. You no longer have to do this. When you go back to your production version and you calculate it, so you do this through the, so I click here where it said plan A and I choose production. And then I recalculate the client using the tools menu, recalculate current client. What you will notice is that the production version now in Dtmax will include a planning summary. And here it is. So you'll notice now that in this case, my client under the original production file has a refund of $284 federal provincial combined. Meanwhile, with a $2,000 RSP contribution, they will now have an $834 refund federal provincial combined. So you no longer have to use your plan A as your base, as your baseline. Under this new innovation of the program produces this planning summary within the production return. All you have to do is complete your plan, recalculate both your production and your plan, and then within your production version of the return, you will see this planning summary, which will now give you the comparative between your production and your plan. So now we find ourselves in the tax return. So let's have a look at some of the productivity features that we find within the tax return. So first, let's start with the review tags. So as we saw earlier with the data entry, there were review tags where we could put check marks or question marks next to certain fields that also triggered certain diagnostics. Well, we can do the same thing on the tax return screen. And it goes even further as far as the options we can choose with these review tags. Let's try an example. So I'm looking at other employment income. So I see an amount of $514.58. You know what? I'm looking at all the information here and I'm not sure this amount is correct, or it could actually really be wrong. So what I could do while I'm on the tax return screen is simply right click on the field, and then you'll notice options for review tags. So you could put a question mark, you could tag it as an error, you could tag it that you checked it and everything is fine, or you could even tag it as a final check as well, meaning it was double checked by a supervisor within the office. Okay, you could go even one further. What you can also do is add review notes like we saw in the data entry within the tax return screen as well. And by going through the reviewed note option, you could also choose the tag that you want to assign to that specific field. Now, let's start simple with just adding a tag on the field. Example, let's say I check this, it's an error. Something's wrong. So I right click and then I choose error, or tag error in this case. And notice the program will assign now the review tag of an error for that field. It highlights the field in red and also highlights the page for which the review tag is on in the Forms Navigator here on the left. So you get two levels of tags. Now, let's go one further. Let's say I not only want to tag it, I also want to explain why it is an error. What is wrong with it? I can go back to that tag, right click, and I could add a review note to that tag. And like I mentioned before, with the review notes, I could actually specify the tag and enter a note at the same time. So I right click, I say add review note. And you will notice as a first option within this window, the program offers one of the review tags as we saw in the menu before. So I could tag it there. And then I could also put an explanation as to why I believe it's wrong. Okay, and in this case, I'll simply say missed another receipt. So I mention it there that there was a missed receipt of $200 extra on top of the $514. I click now on save. And the program, you will notice, not only has it tagged it, in this case, as an error, but has also added a note that you can review afterwards. Now from here, you can also right-click on any one of these fields, and you could ask the program to give you a list of all the review tags that you've put on the customer's tax return. So any one of the fields that's there, just right-click on any one of them and tell the program to list all of the review tags. Once you've done that, you'll notice that the program will give you this list. In my case, I only have one, but if I had several, it would actually list them in this window. Okay, it gives you the note that is on that review tag. Double click and it takes you directly to the tag for you to review. And then of course from there, you could switch around. You could change the review tag to anything you would like. Let's say everything is fine. You checked it. The receipt was erroneous. I simply say tag checked okay. Now it's highlighted in green and everything is fine. And the tag has also been highlighted now. The check mark has been placed on the page in which the review tag has been put. So now let's have a look at another feature that is found within the tax return that helps your productivity, which is what we call Quick Track in Dtmax, or what is commonly known as a drill down feature, where you can get to the source of certain amounts that you are looking for within the calculations. So for example, I've got my other employment income. Let's go back to that example here where I've got $514. If I want to see the source of that amount, if I want to see how the program arrived at $514, I could simply double click on that line and the program will direct me, in this case, to the worksheet to show me the entry that was done. In this case, these were GST refunds that I collected in previous years off of likely employment expenses. Now, you could do this with any line that is found within the tax return. You can simply double click and the program will take you directly to the source of the amount. From once you are at the source, you don't have to go back and hunt for the original form that you were on. Just remember that there's always a back button within the taskbar here at the top, which will take you directly back into the field that you originally drilled down from. Okay, so simply click on the back button to get back to the original source. Now, recently, we've also added another aspect of this drill down feature, or again, what we call Quick Track, which is to source from your diagnostics directly. For example, let's go to the optimization report, which is one of a multitude of diagnostic reports that the program will produce based on the entries that you have for this particular client, okay, or for any client that you're producing within Dtmax. You will notice that the program indicates in this case that it has already optimized the medical expense claim amongst the couple. So in this case, you've got medical expenses amongst a couple, and the program, for example, on the federal side, has likely transferred to the lower income spouse, therefore optimizing the medical expense claim. As we know, and as we always say in our taglines, Dtmax's optimizations are automated, meaning that you don't need to trigger the optimizations. The program is wired to get the best refund possible for your clients. So the program will give you this report to indicate to you what it has done, okay, what optimization it has performed automatically for you. Now, should you want to change that optimization, be it your clients don't want to transfer their medical expenses in this example, okay, be it, for whatever other reason, you now have a feature within the program to simply source the keywords directly from the diagnostic page. Instead of going back to the data entry screen and then manually adding the suggested keyword to control this optimization, which is called optimize, you can simply click on the option that says double click here for the source keywords, and Dtmax will produce this window allowing you to add the keyword, in this case the relevant keyword, which is optimize, to your data entry in order to control this optimization. So again, no need to manually go back into the data entry and then remember the keyword that the program gave you. All you have to do is simply double click where it tells you to double click underneath the suggested keyword. This window will appear, giving you the keyword that you need, and you simply tell the program to add it to the data. And then once you click on it, now the program has taken you back to that entry into the keyword, allowing you to make the changes that you want to make. Now let's have a look at a couple of features that are found within the Preferences menu. One that affects your client list, and more specifically your processing status, and another that affects the client letter. Let's start with the client list. And let's go to the Preferences menu and choose the option Users Defaults. So for those of you who don't know the user's defaults specifically, what this menu allows you to do is to set up automated fields within the software. So the program can auto-complete certain areas of the data entry and the tax return for each one of your customers without having you to manually input that information every single time. So for example, under the client information tab, while I'm in the user's defaults, you could tell the program in this case to choose a default province. So every new client that you are creating using the software, Dtmax will default to the province that you've chosen in this menu. There are a few options where you could automate certain things, but one that I want to show you in this presentation under the miscellaneous tab is the e-file consent option of the verification requirements. So this one is particularly handy. Why? Very simply put, by activating this option under the verification requirements section, Dtmax will not allow the transmission of a file that is ready for e-file unless a supervisor has approved the transmission of the return. So this can be a game changer because it allows you to prevent costly mistakes by e-filing returns too early. So I tick the box next to e-file consent and I click save at the bottom right of my screen. By doing so, you will notice now that my client, Paul and Diane, who would ordinarily be eligible for e-filing, are now awaiting e-file consent. So even if I were to batch file returns right now within the Dtmax client list, Dtmax will not allow the transmission of those files unless a supervisor goes in and tells the program that these returns have been checked, the client has signed their e-file authorization forms, and now they are ready to go. Now, in order to tell the software to be ready for transmission, in other words, that the client has signed their authorization forms, within the client list, you simply click on the status information icon. It looks like the blue circle with an eye within it. Click on that icon while you are on the client. So right now I'm on Paul Tremblay. And then you will see a tick mark here for e-file consent signed. So tick that box as a supervisor and say that the customer has signed, the return has been verified, everything is good. I click OK at the bottom right of the screen, and now you will notice that my client is ready for e-file. The second feature related to the preferences menu that I want to show you in this presentation relates to the client letter specifically, and two additional letter types that you can add to the client letters that you remit to your clients. So let's go to the preferences menu and let's choose client letter. And once we're in the client letter window, you have two options at the bottom right of the screen. One option is for a separate engagement letter, and another option is for a separate pro forma questionnaire. So tick those boxes in order to generate those two additional letter types to your client letter. Let's have a look at what it looks like on an actual return. So I will go to Paul Tremblay in my example, and I will recalculate Paul Tremblay based on the new setting that I've added to my preferences menu. So the return gets calculated, and when I go down to the client letter, you have your standard client letter as you are used to remitting to your clients. And then as you scroll down, we get to now what's called the engagement letter. An engagement letter is simply put is a letter that protects you, the preparer, from any lawsuit from your customer based on errors or omissions on their files because there was information missing from the customer. Okay, so this protects you from any pursuit by your customers in the case of missing information from your customer. From there, you also get another type of engagement letter for the sale of a principal residence. We know that a few years ago, the CRA changed the rules as far as the declaration of dispositions of principal residence, where even if there was no taxable gain, you have to declare the gain on the tax return. So this letter essentially allows you again to protect yourself, forcing the client to acknowledge whether they have told you that there was a disposition of a principal residence or not. And then finally, we get to the pro forma questionnaire, which is a very handy form that you can remit to your clients, have them answer for the following year, allowing you to get all the relevant information from your clients without having to hunt it from them every single time. So each page will ask questions as to any changes that have happened in the situation of your customer. And then finally, the program will base the questions on the information that was produced on the tax return itself. So for example, it'll tell the customer, well, based on your previous year, you had a T4 slip, you also had some dividends, you had some capital gains, and you had some rental income as well, for example. So it prompts your customer to bring in the relevant information for you next year. So you remit this to your client, tell them to hold on to it, and next year, go through it, use it as a guide in order to provide to you, the preparer, all the relevant information that you need in order to produce correctly the tax return. So we hope you enjoyed this presentation of productivity features within Dtmax. Thank you for attending the Synergy Conference.